All right, welcome friends to episode 86 of the Inglorious Bastards campaign. With me tonight I have my friend Josh who played Raiken. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey man, how's it going?
There you are. Okay, good.
I'm still here.
Are you taking a drink of your LaCroix?
Your thing. I actually was. I didn't know you were going to be ready so quickly. I'm like, oh crap.
Oh man.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me back, man.
Sure. So you played, and I just talked with Spriggs about this, who played Burren.
Yeah.
He said, your character has evolved over the course of these two arcs, part 1 and part 2 of the campaign, more than probably any other character. And so I'm happy to chat with you about Raiken tonight and just kind of the changes he's gone through. And so I guess we'll just start right kind of back, maybe 30 episodes ago to where you dove through the portal. In order to close the portal at the Grey Havens, you dove through with I think you had the signet ring and the shield.
Shield, yeah.
And you dove in there, and then little did anyone know, but there was part of the shadow was trapped in there with you for 60 years. The 60 years was kind of like the amount of time when I was figuring out, okay, when do these things happen? When do these great big events happen in the campaign? And I tried to make them coincide with things like the defeat of Sauron and the death of the Elisar, Aragorn. And so 60 years is kind of like the magic time for all of the trips that you used across the straight road. And so this first one was you in the portal and the other characters in a boat, right?
Yeah.
And so here you are trapped in this portal, and it dumps you out in Avalone. After being stuck in there with the shadow creatures. So you wanna just refresh everybody's memory about sort of the changes that Raiken went during that time?
Yeah, I guess firstly, and this is actually a question for you too. As the master of lore who created this stuff, I always felt personally, and I think that maybe Raiken felt this way too, that he wasn't sure. I guess he came to this conclusion after this point, but I want to make this point before I describe where he was at in this point. I don't think he was ever quite sure that what he did was necessary. And I'll tell you why that was important to him. But you maybe can clarify that too. Do you think that what he did was actually necessary? Do you think the sacrifice that he thought he was making was essential, or did he do something he thought was essential in jumping in the portal that maybe wasn't necessarily?
Yeah, so I wasn't sure if you were talking about actually doing the ritual, but you're talking about diving through the portal, right?
No, yeah, doing the ritual was a mistake.
I mean, and as I've talked with other players about, it was kind of written in this prophecy, like the second prophecy of Mondos. It doesn't say Raiken's going to do the ritual, but these events are bringing about the Dagoreth, which is prophesized, even though Tolkien kind of moved away from that he came up with his idea for the Dagoreth, and then the explicit things that he had written down he moved away from, though I would argue there are parts of the Ainulindale and the Silmarillion that hint at this final battle, but I digress.
No, that's okay. No, I think that's a good point though. Before we get back on topic here, that's one of the things I love about Tolkien, because it's maybe he moved away from that, right? But it was sort of left there for this deeper lore, right? Yeah. For this, because we watched all these stories happen, we watched the movies, we read the books, and it's the things that did happen, and they were part of their own prophecy. But there might even be this bigger series of events happening, and that's kind of where your campaign comes in, where these sort of nobodies are involved in an equally large secret sequence of events, which is really cool. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. And the other thing to say about Tolkien, and other people speak sort of more eloquently about this, Corey Olsen, Mike Trout, the people that I've interviewed in the past, they would argue that Tolkien never really goes away from one of his original ideas. Like they evolve, and they might show up like 20 years later, and who's to say if Tolkien lived another 20 years if he wouldn't have flushed out this Dagoreth theory, right? Or prophecy. So I just wanted to say that. But to answer your question, so the reason you dived through this portal, if I remember correctly, is because Chief Captain Adamir had Irime by the throat dangling off of this ship, right? And Irime is someone, it was a Noldoran elf who was related to Finwë and actually kind of saved your ass in your origin session. So you had become kind of fond of her, and you guys were all very devastated when he slit her throat, right? But before he did that, the last thing she told you was the ritualist needed to essentially go through the portal, I think is what she said. And
something like that. Yeah.
And that ritualist was you. You did the ritual. Yeah. And so...
Yes, I did.
Yeah, so I mean, I was at this point in the campaign. We're back, sort of talking again about the end of part 1. I did know at that point and was planning already through part 2 and part 3 of the campaign, and so I was trying to draw somebody into the portal so that the story would continue, like from a storyteller's point of view, and that's why I threw that point in there. Plus, I thought it made sense story-wise for the ritualist. The ritualist opened the portal. The ritualist has to close the portal. So let me bring that. Sorry to interrupt you. Let me bring that back to answering your first question, which is that the reason I bring that up is because both I and I felt like Raiken in the story felt when he arrives here after spending 60 something years in torture, essentially 60 years in torture. I think he felt a little embittered, if that makes any sense. Like he had done a thing and suffered greatly, and this sequence of events progressed despite his suffering, I guess. If that makes any sense. Like he landed in this situation where things had happened and were going to continue to happen despite what he felt like was a pretty terrible situation he had gone through. He felt like that pain and that suffering at that point might have been almost pointless, Yeah, that's certainly one way to look at it. But from the world at this point was broken. We were still at the kind of near the end of the Third Age, and of course, after the Númenóreans pissed off the gods or the god, the world sort of broke, and you had this separation between Aman and Erisea and Middle Earth proper, and so one way to think about this is that yes, you brought the shadow with you. You woke in the shadow. The shadow sort of came with you through the portal, and so it kind of spread to the land of the gods, but at the same time, you also kind of purged it from Middle Earth proper. So
that's an interesting way to look at it. I didn't really think about that.
Yeah, so you didn't kill it, but as we learn here, and as your characters have learned already in this campaign, this part 2, is that you can't really kill an Ainur. You can't kill a Maiar, and so you're going to have to sort of come up with a way to get this shadow out of Turin, and without trying to kill him and getting everyone else killed.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of it that way, because I think that and maybe even Raiken hadn't thought of it that way, which is post-story character development for him. In his old, he's off thinking about why and how and all that stuff. But I at that moment, to continue answering your question, I think at that moment he was a little embittered because this thing had come with him. Maybe he didn't have the perspective to realize, because I think the interesting thing to me about Raiken is that he's just all the characters in the story are like this to some extent, but I think Raiken is the extreme example of this, where he's just a dude, right?
Right.
He didn't have any business doing any of this stuff, seemingly, and he played a big role in maybe making it happen, and maybe felt a little bit guilty about that, or felt like he was pulled into that. And then also in pulling this thing, yes, away from Middle Earth, but also it still being there, and it hurt him deeply at this point. So when he comes out of this other end, he's gone from being just a dude that lived in the mountains and the woods and patrolled with his people to being embroiled in this thing and now deeply hurt by this thing to the point where he's like changed. Like we changed his character class in the downtime between these two sessions. Like changed his character class so that now he's essentially like, I don't remember what was called, but it was essentially like a barbarian, right? I mean, he's
so was he was still a slayer? He was a slayer, right? He was a middle earth character. Okay.
Yeah. Because he wasn't Slayer originally,
right? He was a warden.
He was a warden, which is a class that's designed to protect people, to help the class, to be selfless, and he comes out this other side of this thing as someone who's angry and maybe stronger willed because I think that's reflected in the Slayer, right? The Slayer is just like unstoppable will.
Yeah.
But he's angry and hurt and turns into this like, I think a character class change was like a great way to reflect, okay, now he's not the person who says a word of confidence to inspire his allies. He's the person who is just going to rush into battle because he's mad.
And you played that really, really well. I think you in any given situation, I could count on you to both RP and just act in accordance to what Raiken would do. I mean, and it started from the very beginning of part 2. Like in your origin session, we didn't air this, but in your origin session, you actually you were holding your sword as you were beating someone to death with your hand.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah, he's mad.
I remember thinking, Raiken's a changed dude. After that.
Yeah, I remember that now.
Yeah, and granted, these people were trying to kill you. It's not like Raiken was evil. It's just that he was raging.
Yeah, but I think that's like to me, I always love that. Like I love Star Wars for the same reason. Like I love that battle of like good and evil, but I always love that line in the middle where there's somebody who doesn't intend to be standing on the fence, but they are, right? And it's like Raiken, I think, was a great example of that, where he was way off to the one side. He was a noble person, but then all these events sort of push him to he's like standing right on the fence between that bad side and that good side. He's never a bad person, but he finds himself doing more and more violent things. He finds himself being more and more angry and embittered about things, and maybe even lost. He's still finding himself in this huge sequence of events and just going like, "What the hell am I doing here?" Instead of being like on a noble quest, now he's just mad. He's here. There's nothing he can do about it.
Well, so let's take you up to sort of the next part. And right away, sort of at the very beginning of part 1, after everybody's sort of behind the scenes origin sessions that led us after 4 to 6 months. I forget how long we took it off. Everybody's in prison. And you realize now your friends have come to get you. Now what is he feeling?
I think I feel like that's like a shifting point from that darkness, right? This is like, I'm talking about standing on the fence, right?
Yeah.
I feel like this might be one of the reasons why he never crossed that line, why he continued, it's like hope, right? That's hope that he didn't have over 60-something years, and then landing here and finding that he was alone. Because he was alone for not very long, but for some period of time before they showed up, right?
He was. I don't know. It was a couple weeks.
Yeah, a couple weeks. So he's like in this foreign land alone, and then to find them there, and to find that, I do think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think that he would have felt like in that situation, realized that they came there in part to find him. Like that would have been, it maybe, I don't know how he would feel about that, confused, I guess.
Yeah.
The old Raiken would have. The old Raiken might even have expected people to do that for him. I don't know, because his people would be that honorable. But to find that all these people that were just strangers to him, only, how long was the initial campaign? Like, not even a year. A year? And then he goes off and he's 60-something years lost, and then they come to find him. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
It's like a glimmer of hope in that darkness that he felt.
So here you are. You guys escape Avalone. You travel through the land of elms. You meet Lindo and Bare at the Cottage of Lost Play, and that you go to the House of 100 Chimneys and Taco Bell and
Taco Bell.
Taco Bell. Yeah, that was the running joke. Hey, listen, I didn't name these places.
There was no Taco Bell when Tolkien named him either.
And you know what? I bow down to Mr. Tolkien, so I can't even say anything about it. So
absolutely not.
So you meet Irame, who has been released from the halls of Mondos, and in order for her to bring a gift to you from the Spear Elves, from the Vanyar Elves.
Yeah, this is where Raiken gets his spear, right?
Inayor, First Blood.
Yeah. Oh, man, you know what? As a player, I totally remember the sequence of events, but I had forgotten how cool that was, you know? And now I'm trying to look up my character sheet so I can see what the description was that you gave me.
Well, while you're looking it up, I'll talk to you. So I got a chance to interview someone named Paul Strack, who's a Quenya expert, and he translated some of. I asked him to look at some of the words that I had used in Quenya, and Inayor was one of them. It was supposed to mean first blood, and he very politely told me that I botched that one pretty good.
Oh yeah,
and so
did it have a meaning?
And Fiona explained this to me. I interviewed one of his friends, Fiona Jolings, who's the Sindarin expert, and she explained, the way people sort of get started, into these conlangs, these made-up languages, is they have a tendency to just grab a hold of something without really looking to see if it was whether the word is an adjective or a noun, and then you put them together and you try to create something that sounds nice. And that's essentially what I did, right? I still I stand by Gwarthour and Tarminoth and Inayor, Nos Glanador. You guys were the Fellowship of those all sound. The Battle of Rue Limdal, those sound right. They sound really good. However, most of them are not very good. So essentially, what I would do would be I'd be putting two adjectives together, or
Gotcha.
a part of a word that should not be in that part of the phrase.
I know exactly what you mean too. It's the same mistake that people make when they're learning language. If you take an English speaker and they go to someone who speaks Japanese and go, what is my name in Japanese? Well, it's your name doesn't exist in Japanese. Right? I can pick words that sound like your name, and they're going to mean something completely different, and it will sound like your name in Japanese, but your name doesn't. Josh is not a thing in Japanese, right?
Well, so Paul suggested that we call Inayor Minya Serke.
Okay. Did you rename it in the campaign here?
I did not. No.
Okay.
Minya Serke is accurate, but doesn't sound as good as Inayor to me.
It definitely does not.
All right. Well, let me see here. So I have a few more questions for you.
No problem.
So I guess I'll ask you the same thing that I tend to ask everybody, and that's, and I'll just leave it free form. Do you have a favorite NPC or a favorite scene from Part 2, Rise of the Mormagil?
One of the ones that I could remember off the top of my head is, and I think this was in Part 2. We were on a bridge, and some monster came out of the water next to it, and it wasn't just Raiken. It was a couple people ended up on top of it. Just jumped off and just were I'm going to stand on this thing and start peeing on it. Was that?
So you're getting. It's really funny that you bring this up.
Am I getting two different things messed up?
Yeah.
Because in the naval battle, that's right. Okay.
Yeah. So we had two naval battles, but what's funny about this is, and Spriggs actually brought this up. He was referencing a tentacle monster, and I got it confused with a different tentacle monster, and then I had to look inside and realize maybe there's something wrong with me that I had so many tentacle monsters in this thing.
Well, there was a few, right?
There was a few, right? We had more Ulun, right? The creature in the well had tentacle things. We you had the Watcher at Tharbad had tentacle things, and this was in Part 1. And then here in Part 2, you had the thing near the bridge, it was a worm thing, which is, you could argue, is just one big tentacle. And then and then you guys were the first naval battle. There was the giant something or other with tentacles.
Squid thing. Yeah. And which one of those was the one that Raiken ended up Are you not there yet?
Oh no, we've passed
okay.
that. So we that was on the way to the Tower of Pearl.
Okay.
And this was like right when Faradyr's like maybe gonna turn into a werewolf sometime soon.
Yes.
And yeah, you and Byrne were like going at it. You were looking over the side, and then here comes Raiken, just runs and jumps on this thing's eye.
I don't know. Like, I love that stuff. There were so many moments. Like, as we're talking about this, I'm just remembering more and more things that happened. There was so many moments in this campaign because it was so big, and there's so many different like sort of levels to this adventure that we went on. All the stuff about the College of Lost Play was cool, just because it connects to parts of the lore that I think are awesome. Little moments like that in combat, like I personally, the stuff that always sticks with me the most in any D&D campaign are some of those moments like that where a player does something creative like that, right? And I think there was a few of them in this game, not just from Raiken, but like from all the players, where it's like, okay, well, how are we going to solve this problem? We're going to use the thing we have in a really crazy way, or we're gonna make some sort of sacrifice, or we're just going to do something that's illogical. Like just going to jump on it and see what happens.
Well, I really appreciated. So that's the kind of player I am when I play D&D. And as a DM, that's one of the things that I was always afraid that I was putting up too many walls, right? Because we had the wall that we had to live with, which was our time constraint, right? We were playing 3 10-week sessions, right? And
trying to cap those sessions at only just a few hours anyway, or an hour, or whatever it was.
And then I kind of had to move you guys to the next thing. So I was always capped and sort of walled by time. I was always walled by like getting you guys to the next part of the story, even though we had those time constraints, right? And so I was always afraid, and in hindsight, I still think like that people didn't feel as comfortable as you felt, obviously, just doing something like that, because those are the things that you remember as a player, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's hard. I think that I don't want to say that you were walled in a little bit by the lore too, but I think in the end you kind of are. Like the setting is about heroes, right? And so people are kind of thinking in that hero mindset, whereas like traditional D&D they almost tells you that you should be a crazy person a lot of times, right? I mean, if you pick even a neutral character, people start thinking, okay, what am I going to do that's crazy? But like in this Lord of the Rings setup, everyone is really supposed to be a hero, and they're supposed to be acting heroic. So I think they put this thing in their head sometimes that limits themselves from doing what might be crazy, or what might be dark, or what might be, misconstrued as evil too. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. So,
which is okay because I think in the long run it's totally okay for the universe and for the story and all that kind of stuff to be like that. But I can't help myself. I always want to do something stupid.
Well, one of the places that I, as a DM, need to, I think, like I'm always trying to evaluate what I need to do better, and I think is, it's creating an environment where my players feel comfortable doing what you feel comfortable doing, right? And sort of trying to
asking to do things that are sort of on the boundaries of the rules, or outside the rules, or outside the norm.
Just being creative. I think you said it best. Just being creative. Not like, okay, I'm gonna pick this spell in my spell book. It's more of like using the environment, right? And just because as verbose and as effusive with description as any DM could get, you still aren't totally describing the world, and it's up to players to sort of fill in that other stuff with their imagination. I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think that players can be a really critical part of storytelling in Dungeons and Dragons. They might even be the most critical part, because it's like you said, it's up to them to ask for the things that the DM didn't describe.
Right.
Do I see this? Do I see that? Can I do this? Is there anything I can drop on this guy? Is there any way I can trip this guy? Is there any way I can make this guy fall, slip off of something? All those things are up to the players to ask, and it's hard to get players to do that.
The moral of this story would be that, if your players ask you to do something like that, as a DM, you should feel obligated to say yes.
Yeah, as much as you can. Don't let them hurt themselves. I mean, let them hurt themselves. Yeah, but don't let them hurt their enjoyment of the game by doing it. But yeah, saying yes as much as you can is definitely true.
Yeah,
definitely good direction.
So that'll be the name of this episode. Say yes. Raiken says, "Say yes."
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. Can I interview you real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
What is your favorite moment?
Oh wow.
Maybe in general, or even for Raiken in this section of the campaign.
Okay.
You can pick a general one if you want, but you can also pick a Raiken one if you feel like it.
Well, so I'll give you one in game and one sort of like meta podcast moment.
Okay.
So I think my favorite episodes are the ones where I can tell the players are having fun.
Sure.
And I don't know if you were at this one. I think you were. Do you remember the Fords of Eisen episode and the white handprint episode of the Urukai and the Saruman? It was.
I don't remember. I don't think so.
I think maybe, yeah, because MJ, I think, was filling in for you that night.
Okay.
It is arguably, I laughed so hard. Christian, my brother, who played Angelin in the first part of the campaign, was just a really funny guy, and he had some great one-liners. And
his character was hilarious too. He's a funny guy, and his character was hilarious.
And I just, I think Max created a meme about the Urukai and Saruman standing next to him, where the white handprint was, and like,
no, I do remember that. Yeah.
It was hysterical, and so that was probably one of my favorite in-game moments. And I probably should be talking about part 2 because that's what we're talking about. But I think overall, like generally, that was my favorite episode. And I will say that in like terms of podcasting and sort of producing this after the fact, I think one of my favorite things that I didn't even know that I really enjoyed was interviewing people.
Really?
And I'm not only interviewing the players, but I have people like Corey Olsen and Michael Drought and Fiona Jolings and Paul Strack and Christopher Pearson from Lord of the Rings Online. I have just so many, and we have so many great people coming up. David Day, the Tolkien author, has agreed to come on the podcast. I don't want to give too many spoilers away, but we have some other people that I'm really excited about. And I didn't even know that I enjoyed that sort of thing.
That's awesome.
But it's super cool because like I definitely do my research. I buy books, I read books, I listen to lectures online, and so I'm definitely like immersing myself still in this world, and actually far more knowledgeable now than I was when I did the campaign. But it's just an incredible experience to interact with these people who are much smarter than me and know so much more about the world, and I get to essentially let these people be passionate about the things that really mean something to them, and it's been an incredible experience.
That's kind of crazy to think that. Or not crazy, but it's cool to think that this campaign that you put so much work into, and that was like a long time ago now.
Yeah.
Still has like this life of its own, because of these interviews and things that you're doing, and like you said, you're still sort of living in this whole thing. That's cool. It's cool to see that it's branched out, and all the rest of us have gone off and gone about our lives, and this thing is still like enveloping you. You're interviewing all these people and learning things that you never knew before, and having people tell you that your names suck, which is cool, right?
No, it is.
It's kind of cool for someone, to tell you like, this is the way it really is, because you'll know next time it'll be even better. Which is crazy because the lore in this story was awesome to begin with.
I've kept you for over 30 minutes now.
That's fine.
We're going to talk to you again really soon. So for the listener, it'll be. I would guess it would be in about 10 to 15 episodes for the full cast reunion at the end of part 2.
Awesome!
But we're looking forward to seeing you again here soon.
Cool, man. Thank you for having me as always, man. I want to play another one of your campaigns one of these days too.
All right, we'll get you back in.
Awesome.
All right, take it easy.